Welcome back to True Cyber Crimes. I'm Chris.
And I'm Nick.
Nick, when you think of Hawaii, what's the first thing that comes to mind?
Uh, Shaved ice for sure. There's a spot that does shaved ice and macadamia nut ice cream together.
Ooh,
It's magical. It's up on the North Shore. I love it. But I know it's the palm trees, it's the beaches, it's the postcards, right? Um, but
yeah.
it is the last place on Earth that you associate with high-stakes international digital warfare, Chris.
And that is exactly what the bad actors count on. They love a target that feels safe. But on December 19th, 2022, while most of the staff at University of Hawaii was dreaming of the holiday break, a silent and invisible predator was moving through their network. We're talking about the University of Hawaii Cancer Treatment Center.
I got a problem with this one, Chris. I mean, we, right? We talk
Yeah.
about businesses, banks, corporate espionage and things like that. But when you get into healthcare and especially cancer centers, that's I got a problem, right? So
Yeah, agreed.
this is a clinical trial. This is like where genetic roadmap of someone's fight for survival is being mapped, and they're trying to figure that kind of thing out, right? Like, yeah, I got issues with this, to say the
Yeah,
least.
this is the ultimate low blow. But in the world of ransomware, there's no such thing as a non-combatant, unfortunately. If it has a server and a bank account, it's a target. So today we're breaking down the Hive ransomware attack on UH, the FBI's secret ghost operation, and why healthcare is currently the most dangerous frontier in cybersecurity.
All right, so we've kind of, set the scene in beautiful Hawaii. How does the top tier research facility on cancer in Honolulu get owned, or if we're using hacker speak, pwned?
Yeah. Well, as we've talked, it's not a James Bond kind of break-in. It's usually something that starts out pretty mundane. A single phished credential, an unpatched VPN, and in the case of UH Cancer Center, the attackers didn't just stumble in; they exploited the openness that really defines academia.
Yeah, I mean, it's the whole idea of universities is sharing information, learning, building knowledge, right? So they are kind of inherently open in that regard. They want, in the case of research universities, especially, they want researchers that are maybe out in Germany to be able to collaborate with doctors that are in the Honolulu area. It's that kind of frictionless environment that scientists really really love, right? They just want to share information and try things. But if you're in cybersecurity or you're a chief information security officer, it's an absolute nightmare.
Exactly. And once the attackers or members of the Hive group gained a foothold, they didn't just lock the doors, they stayed quiet. This is what we call dwell time. They spent days, maybe weeks mapping the network. They found the crown jewels, the patient management systems, and the backup servers.
Yeah, that living off the land is the scariest part, because if you're not monitoring, you're not being proactive, and you're not looking for that kind of thing, they're just sitting there figuring everything out, right? They're flying under that radar.
Hmm.
And it's the most calculated part of a lot of these attacks, to for their on their part to have the discipline to not pull that trigger until they know what they want and they have a way out. And if you, as the organization, whether it's a business, a bank, a hospital, research university, you can't restore from backups because the hackers have deleted them. You have to pay, or uh, we die, right? Like in this case,
Yeah.
maybe people actually die.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
that's pretty terrible.
And that was the scenario. And the Hive was the best in the business at this. They used double extortion. And on December 19th, the staff walked in to find the dreaded README file on their screens. Their files were encrypted with an extension like .hive. But the real kicker, a message saying we have 24,000 of your records. If you don't pay, we start leaking them on the Hive Leaks dark website.
So let's talk about Hive for a second. We've mentioned them before in some of our other, podcasts, but they weren't just guys in hoodies in their basement. They're you know, this is becoming a common theme, right? They're sophisticated.
Mm-hmm.
They're a ransomware as a service. They're an organization. It's not just some lone hackers doing malicious stuff.
No, this is their full-time job. It's literally a franchise model. The core Hive developers write the code and they maintain the leak site. Then they recruit affiliates, the digital hitmen, if you will, to do the actual breaking and entering. The developers take 20% cut and the affiliates keep the rest.
Yeah. So think of the Google Play or the Apple App Store, but for criminals. They provide a platform, and then you provide the crime that you want to use with that platform that's been made available to you.
And we've talked about it before. Well, not most, but these more sophisticated hackers would have a code of ethics. They didn't hit certain targets, but this code of ethics was basically non-existent. Our evil and dark side occasionally, those are some other hackers occasionally claim they wouldn't hit hospitals. Hive was notorious for going after healthcare, schools, non-for-profits. They knew these organizations were understaffed, underfunded, and most importantly, they're desperate.
Yeah, I mean, it just creates an urgency factor in those situations. Um, if you go, you need a new Barca lounger, and you go over to Furniture Warehouse or something, Chris. You can, they can stay offline and they can still sell you that Barca lounger while they're negotiating
Right?
with the hackers. But when you're talking about a cancer center that's treating patients whose lives are on the line, literally every minute that system is down could mean a patient misses a critical chemotherapy appointment, or dose of life-saving medication. So Hive, unfortunately, ethics out the window. They use those life and death situations to really pressure and gain that position of power in the negotiation.
Yeah. And I talked about how this wasn't a James Bond break-in, but here's where the story turns into the beginning of a James Bond movie. While the University of Hawaii was panicking, the FBI was already in the room, unbeknownst to them.
All right, so I love this part. This is and I love the movie. We're movie theme here today, Chris. We've got Bond. There's the Christopher Nolan Inception movie. So this is the inception of this particular cybercrime. So explain for us how the feds were inside Hive servers while Hive was attacking University of Hawaii Cancer Center.
Okay, so it is a pretty exciting story here. Beginning in July of 2022, 6 months before the Hawaii hit, the FBI's cyber division, they managed to infiltrate Hive's infrastructure. They didn't just see the servers, they had the master keys.
So every time Hive goes and locks up a victim's files and demands, I don't know, $5 million, what was the FBI doing?
They were playing the digital Robin Hood. They identified over 300 decryption keys for the victims who were currently being extorted. They would quietly call the IT director of the hospital or the school and say, "Hey, don't pay the ransom. Here's the key to unlock your servers. Just don't tell the hackers we gave it to you. Tell them you figured it out."
So the ghost in the machine, another movie reference, as well as they were the ultimate ghost in the machine.
Yeah.
Working for the people this time, so that's cool. So the hackers are working hard, working their little fingers to the bone to get in there and encrypt and try to ransom this stuff, and thinking untouchable, what they've done is untouchable. The victims are just going to be hoaxed. instead the victims are just kind of exiting stage left and taking the encryption key and going on with their day.
So I feel like this is almost turned into a feel-good story here. Let's see how it keeps moving along, right? So
Yeah.
the FBI effectively prevented over $130 million in ransom payments over 7 months. But the operation was a delicate tightrope. If they moved too fast, Hive would realize they were compromised, and they could have just easily changed all the keys. So they had to wait for the perfect moment to take down the whole thing.
Yeah. So let's, go back to the islands here. Did the FBI in this case, did they save the cancer center?
Well, and that's the tragedy of timing. The UH breach happened in late December. The FBI's takedown of Hive didn't happen until January 26, 2023. Hawaii was one of the last victims caught in the crossfire before the feds pulled the plug on the whole operation.
That makes me that makes me sick. So the cancer
Yeah.
center did have to navigate like this, this horrific situation through, the Christmas holiday, and of course, this is how they do it, right? They do it when, people are operating at, skeleton staff, and there's not a lot of people there, and suddenly have to do that. So Christmas of 2022, cancer center's out of luck. They have to go through it on their own. Um, do we have an idea what this looked like at the ground level with
Yeah.
the poor team that was trying to support this and figure it out?
I got us all fired up and thought this was gonna be that great feel good story. Let's keep moving along, right? It was chaos, Nick. They had to take the entire cancer center network offline to stop the bleeding. That wasn't just about email. It was the human infrastructure we always talk about. The researchers, years of data on clinical trials for the unique Hawaii and Pacific Islander population, data that doesn't exist anywhere else, was locked away. The patients, 24,000 individuals, had to be notified that their names, social security numbers, and potentially their health status were in the hands of a Russian-speaking cartel.
So just to deviate for a quick second, I know we've kind of had like a movie theme here, but there's relatively new show on HBO streaming service called The Pit, and it's kind of like the new ER from back in the day, and great show, medical drama, and in the current season, all this emergency room has to the whole hospital is under threat of cyber attack, and so they opt to take everything offline to prevent the cyber attack from impacting them. Anyway, just kind of an aside, but my wife and I were watching it. I was like, okay, that's actually like
Yeah,
that's a
that's
hard
real
decision
world.
to make, but yeah, it's interesting. So, but back to our story here. So, you kind of talk through what the researchers and what the patients are going through. I mean, put yourself in the shoes of the patients, right? You're already
Yeah.
fighting for your life and dealing with all the emotional and physical and stress that goes along with that. And then you get a letter, from the University of Honolulu Cancer Center, saying that your most private information is now, being leaked on the dark web, that you're a commodity. That just feels like a level of violation that, there's just no fix, right? Don't they can send out the, sorry, your data has been leaked and here's some credit monitoring, but man, that's just, incredible insult to injury.
And chances are you're already having your credit monitored for another leak that happens somewhere else. So
Yeah,
it's like
yeah.
there's nothing real that happens there. And the cost of the university was massive. Even if they didn't pay the ransom, which they haven't confirmed, the forensic cleanup, the legal fees, and the reputational repair, it cost millions. It's hard to even put a number on it.
So there is an interesting fact here that I think people tend to miss. When a research center like University of Hawaii gets hit, that's not just a quote unquote local problem.
Yeah, you're talking about the intellectual property angle.
Yeah, exactly. Why does a ransomware group care about cancer research? because they can sell it, right? That's valuable. That's people want and need that.
Yeah.
Even nation states, we've seen reports involving North Korea and other nation state bad actors who are happy to buy stolen medical research and jumpstart their own pharmaceutical industries, and beat the United States to the market with something. So
Just horrible. It's a secondary market. Ransomware is the front, but the data exfiltration is the long-term play. It's a tax on innovation. Every dollar UH spends on cybersecurity is a dollar not spent on finding a cure for leukemia or lung cancer.
yeah. I just had a thought, something I wanted to add. Maybe I'll come back. But so this is December 2022. Hive hits this University of Hawaii, and then we fast forward about a month to January 26th of 2023. What happened then?
Okay, so the FBI, along with German and Dutch authorities, coordinated a strike. They seized Hive's servers in California and the Netherlands. They replaced the Hive leaks site with a giant glowing banner that said, "The Federal Bureau of Investigation seized this site." Awesome.
Yeah, okay.
That's cool.
I mean, I guess that feels satisfying. It's kind of like a big delete button, but yeah, maybe a little too late for the University of Hawaii. But
Yeah, it was a huge blow, but here in the true cybercrime reality check, Nick, ransomware groups don't usually die; they rebrand. When the FBI takes down a group like the Hive, the developers just take their laptops to a different coffee shop, change their name to something like Hunters International or Cyclops, and start over with slightly different code.
yeah, it's a big game of whack-a-mole. The law enforcement hammer and in this case, and the moles that have billion-dollar budgets, because frankly they're back more often than not.
Yeah. So what did we learn from the University of Hawaii?
Well, I think the first takeaway is security through geography is a myth. You can be on a remote island in the Pacific. Doesn't matter if you're connected to the internet. It's the same neighborhood as far as hackers anywhere in the world are concerned.
Sure. And second, the importance of segmentation. The cancer center was breached. The breach was contained because UH had started the process of separating their departments. If they hadn't, the entire university system, all 10 campuses, could have gone dark.
Yeah. Really can't stress enough the importance of segmentation in networks today. And finally, and most terribly, is the human cost. And we have to stop looking at these as just being what we call IT events. When a cancer center goes down, it's frankly a health crisis for the entire public. We need to treat the people who protect us with the same respect we give people who protect our borders.
Agreed. So the University of Hawaii Cancer Center is back up and running today. They've hardened their defenses, and the FBI's Operation Hive is taught in schools as a master's class, an offensive defense. But for the 24,000 people whose data was stolen, the digital scar remains forever.
Yeah, it's a reminder, Chris, that in the 21st century, safety is an illusion. We have to work for every single day.
Yeah. And hey, thanks for joining us on True Cyber Crimes. And if you're sitting at work and you're listening to this, maybe go ahead and update your password. And for heaven's sakes, don't click on that invoice attached from a sender you don't know.
Yep. Even if it looks like it could be for a free shave ice with macadamia nut.
Oh, very nice. Stay safe out there. We'll see you next week when we dive into the world of phishing, where your own voice can be used against you.
Yep. Sounds like fun. Catch you then, Chris.
Good to see you, Nick.